Hi, and welcome to Couch Conversations Beyond the Textbook, where real talk meets real life in the world of mental health. We're your hosts, Abby and Bethany, two therapists who have been through the textbooks and are entering the trenches. This is a space where we unpack what they didn't teach you in grad school, the messy, the meaningful, and the moments that shape us as professionals and people. So grab a seat on the couch and let's dive in. Please note that the content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of a qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding your mental health or medical condition. The views and opinions expressed by hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of any organizations or professionals they may be affiliated with. If you are in crisis, or if you think you may have a mental health emergency, please call 911 or contact a local mental health crisis line or emergency service in your area. Welcome back to Couch Conversations Beyond the Textbook. I'm your co-host, Bethany.
I'm Abby, and today we're going to talk about overcoming your fears about starting grad school.
Big topic today.
Lots of that, yeah.
Yeah, definitely an important one to talk about, though. I think if you told me that you went into grad school with no fears, I would know you'd be lying.
100%, yeah. A lot of fears. Why don't you get us started with some of the things that was going through your mind when you knew you had to take this step?
I think looking ahead at grad school, there's just a lot. Like you think, especially in the counseling profession, it always seems like there's another step. So You graduate from your undergrad, you apply for grad school, you do the interview to get into grad school, then you finally get in. Super exciting. And then you just don't know what to expect. So there's already fear in the unknown. Yep. And then your very first class in grad school, they have you do all the research for your state licensure, things like that. That feels really overwhelming. So I think that class right off the bat, super helpful and informative and necessary.
Yes. Yeah.
But at the same time, definitely was like, oh wow, so it's not just you graduate and you're done. It's you graduate and now you have to get more hours, and now you have to take you take the NCE, then you have to get more hours, and now you have to take another exam after a certain amount. And it differs from each state, of course. So for us, Indiana, rules and licensure and things like that, that's what we follow. But for each person in different states, it's different. So any of our listeners could be feeling overwhelmed with their state requirements and things like that. I think that was one of the biggest things learning before or right at the start of grad school, but also knowing before that there was a lot more to it than just you graduate and have your master's. Or it's not like an MBA program. It's just different how it works. So
yeah, there's still... I always compared it to, and I didn't start comparing this until after that class when we learned how extensive our training has to be. It really does feel like your residency into becoming a doctor after you graduate, because you have another, depending on how many hours you work after you graduate, 2 to 3 years of still training under someone.
Yes.
Still, but at this point you're paying someone to be your supervisor. Before you can be fully licensed. And then you have continuing education after that to renew your license. So there's a lot, and there's a lot of fear and feeling overwhelmed when you learn all that. I think our professors did a really good job of trying to, not necessarily downplay, but kind of trying to remind you that it's just one step at a time. And looking at it as stepping stones.
Yeah, it's definitely can feel overwhelming when you're looking at, the 5-year plan of the counseling, degree and profession and licensure and things like that. What would you say were some of your fears going into even your undergrad, as we talked about last episode, or going into the master's program?
I think for me, my fears were different. To me, getting my master's degree was a means to an end. I knew I had done research, being older, knowing to kind of give myself an idea of what it would look like for me. And I knew and I understood that to be licensed in Indiana, I was going to have to continue to do things after I graduated. So my fears going into grad school really revolved around my family. And my son at the time was, when I started my bachelor's degree, I think he was, what did we say, 7 years ago? 4. And so by the time I graduated, he was about to turn 12. So he's 5, 4 or 5, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And so it was a very long time. And there was a lot of fear about, what am I going to miss? What things am I going to have to say no to? I was a stay-at-home mom. I was very involved in what they did. And so there was a lot of fear of that. And a lot of that fear came true. I had to miss out on vacations with my in-laws. And there were field trips I would have to say no to. And there were games. I was a softball coach of my daughter's softball league. And I would have to miss games because I had class. So I think for me, it was just a lot of communication, a lot of talking to my kids about what it would look like and why I'm doing it, and having them be as involved as I could.
Yeah. So for you, it was really a complete life shift going from being a stay-at-home mom to starting this, 7-ish year journey of school.
Yeah.
And figuring that out and with your family.
Yeah, and having had ADHD my whole life and not being able to complete projects, anybody out there who has ADHD can attest to, we tend to start things and then either lose interest, or I did not know how it was going to go for me. And I can fully say it wasn't me that did it, it was God. But that was one thing right before graduation, our supervisor at Grace asked me, what did I learn about myself in this process? And the biggest thing I learned was that I can finish things. Yeah.
That's exciting.
It's very exciting.
That's such a, accomplishing feeling. Even just finishing graduate school in general is a feat in itself. So, but to be doing that on top of life is...
busy life.
Yeah. And I think that's something that I'm sure we'll talk about in the future. But the difficulty of life on top of grad school and what that looks like. But for this episode, we're talking about some of our fears going into grad school, that feeling of, can I actually do this?
Yeah.
Can I finish this master's degree? Can I make it towards licensure, full licensure, all of the things?
I'm feeling what I felt at the beginning just talking about it, like the tightness of the chest and like the... Yeah. Almost the nervousness.
Yeah. Where do you think that's coming from?
It's a good question. I think just knowing that there are people out there that are feeling it again. Like I have the empathy for them, knowing what that's like. Like, it was scary. Yeah.
What would you tell someone going into thinking about going into grad school if they were having these same thoughts?
Yeah, I think I would just say you got to take it day by day. Like, I think the big thing for me was I set a very rigid schedule where I wouldn't do homework on the weekends. So I would do all my homework during the week. But again, that's a testament to that hyper focus, that my superpower, I always called my ADHD superpower, was that hyper focus. And I could sit down and do homework for 9 hours in a day and not realize it. Yeah. What would you say?
I think similarly to echo you, taking it day by day is important. It's easy to get overwhelmed, especially when you're taking multiple classes, you have multiple assignments. It can be really easy to be even just thinking about the next 8 weeks or the next 16 weeks and everything that you have to do at the end. But it's you still have, weekly assignments or things like that. So taking it day by day it's hard, but it's important. I think something I would tell them is that you can do it, but it's going to be hard. And kind of something that you had said is you weren't sure what the no's were going to look like. Yeah. And that's something that I think you learn quickly in grad school, is that you will have to say no's to a lot of things. And that's hard. And I know for me, I am a big FOMO gal. I have the fear of missing out ingrained in me. I don't want to miss out on anything. And I think that was one of the most difficult aspects of grad school, was knowing going into it that there are going to be a lot of no's that you have to say and boundaries that you have to set for the time so that you can accomplish this goal, which is a worthy goal, but doesn't make that any less hard. And I would say that you can do it, but you have to learn to say no sometimes.
And sometimes that in and of itself is therapeutic
Yeah.
for people who have a hard time saying no. Like, you have to be able to say no and let no be the answer.
Yeah.
You don't have to explain it.
Yes. Yes. With graduate school, definitely kind of forcing you to set those boundaries and what that looks like as a grad student. And that can be scary at first, for sure. Any boundary is scary at first when you're not used to doing it. But even for yourself, of like, what does it look like to set a schedule for myself and to say, hey, I have to do homework this time and I really can't budge on that. And like you said, you would try to do everything during the week and not on the weekends. I was similar. I would really try hard to get everything done and have my Sundays off. I wanted my Sundays off. I like to be at home be at home with my husband on Sundays. In the fall, we watch football every Sunday. Like, it's just a whole thing. I just want my Sundays off. And there were times where that wasn't attainable. Like group meetings and all of that fun stuff, group projects when everyone can only meet on Sunday. Yeah. Different things like that. But for the most part, you control what you control.
Absolutely. Speaking of group projects, I don't know about you, but I thought grad school going into it was going to be a lot of paper writing. Lots and lots and lots of writing papers and research. And there is a good amount of that. Yeah. I was not prepared for the amount of group work we'd have to do. Yes. And I don't know if all programs are the same, but I imagine that there's a lot of group work overall.
Yes. I feel like there was a lot of group work that I wasn't expecting. So similar. It also made it hard being a online program when you're like, there were people in our program from all over the United States. So you're in different time zones. Everybody has different schedules. Everybody, different priorities, different stage of life. Yes. Like, there's all of these things that some people are retired and going back to school. Some people are working full time while in school. And so trying to figure out everyone's schedules was kind of a feat in itself.
It was a huge feat. And as somebody who is older, working with people who are a lot younger, I wanted to have like I said, I like to have my work done before the weekend, but if that wasn't attainable because it was a group project, I would want to have it done as early as possible. And you have to be flexible in that you're going to work with somebody who is a procrastinator and is going to get it done at the last second. And that was something that was very challenging for me and really pushed me outside my comfort zone. And I had to learn not only to be flexible, but also how to speak up, which was tough. Yeah.
Yeah, how do you communicate with people that you may have only met on Zoom?
Yes.
Or, somebody that's in your program, or once a year, or things like that. Yeah. Just figuring out how to communicate well with people and finish those group projects on time.
And I think ultimately you learn that everybody has this, we all have a similar goal, right? And so as long as communication is a key part of what you're doing in school, everybody's very kind and understanding, and you'll get good feedback from people if you're like, I really want to get this done by this time. The communication is generally going to be like, I'll see what I can do to make that happen for you.
Yeah. And the nice thing about a counseling master's program is that the hope is that everyone is more empathetic and understanding to begin with.
Yeah, we're all coming from that same place of wanting to help.
Yeah, I had found that most people could acknowledge, like, hey, if there was someone slacking and they were still communicating, like, hey, something went down this week, people were pretty, understanding of that and would work around people. But definitely, the group projects were a little bit...
Gotta be prepared for that.
A little bit shocking, Something that you had mentioned of just that we've kind of talked about the age gaps and different walks of life, and you're obviously older than me, have more life
20 years almost exactly, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that was one of my fears going into grad school too, that I hadn't expected until I got there. Is I don't know why in my head I assumed there would be more young people in our program that were my age.
I was shocked by that
also. Like, I remember my family would ask me, like, oh, like, kind of what's the, who's all in your grad program, what are the ages or whatever. And I would be like, I'm one of the only people that just graduated college. I mean, there weren't that many of us comparatively, which shocked me. Like, I would have thought it almost, the demographics would have been switched. And so I think with that, when I first entered the grad program, went to my first residency, I almost felt the inferiority come into play in that I was like, I don't have the same life experience as these other, you know, classmates of mine. Like, they're, you know, so much wiser, so much older than I am, and like, they're gonna be so much better than I am because they have this life experience. And that was something that I really had to kind of work through myself and know that, yes, they have, you know, more life experience than me, and that is gonna serve them super well, but that doesn't mean I'm gonna, you know, be a bad counselor because of that.
Absolutely. I was shocked by that as well, that I was in the majority. Yeah. Because in undergrad I was not, obviously. Right. And it very much surprised me. But to your point of having the life experience and all of those things not necessarily playing a huge part in how we grow as counselors, to that point, I have learned that our clients need all of us. They need everyone. Yeah. There are going to be many clients that probably relate more to you than me because of age, and vice versa. So that was very refreshing as well. Yeah. To learn that it can be very overwhelming and daunting, but in the actual practice, it doesn't matter as much.
Yeah. And I think it was cool even getting to know so many of my classmates like at the residency, and there's quite a few that come to mind that I just respected so much or respect so much. And it was funny during the classes to see like how the younger, you know, students could really help and assist the older students with things, and then vice versa, how the older students really brought a lot of knowledge and wisdom to conversations that, you know, might differ, and the younger students brought a lot of knowledge to conversations that, like, you know, an older person might not understand fully, or even just having the experience to, like, I've had clients that are a little older, and that's been, like, I've learned a lot from my older classmates that has been helpful in that and things like that, I think.
Yeah, I had a similar experience, and I don't know if you would agree with this, but I didn't feel like the age gap was even noticeable. It was just,
I mean, look at us.
I mean, yeah. Here we are.
We're grad school besties.
That's right. Like 20-year age gap. Yeah. No, I agree with that.
Yeah. I think it's cool that's another cool thing about the online program is that it can really bring people together.
From all over.
But would you say that with the online program, was that something, I guess you did online for undergrad.
Yeah.
So you were kind of used to it.
I did go to college right out of high school for a year.
Okay. So was the online program something that you were nervous about? Because I know a lot of grad programs are transitioning to that. So anyone who's listening that's kind of debating, can I do an online program or should I go in person? You know, obviously we don't have the in-person grad program experience to speak on, but
I think my nervousness with the online came more about like credentially. Is it going to hold as much weight having graduated from an online program than an in-person? But since I did do that, finished my bachelor's degree online, I already knew that it would be just fine. Yeah. But I can absolutely see, and I have heard people talk about, like, is online legit? Can we do that? Does it matter? Yeah. And is that something that you struggled with?
I think going from undergrad right into an online master's, because I was obviously in person for undergrad. Yeah. With that being said, though, my sophomore year was COVID. My sophomore year of my undergrad was COVID. Okay. So things changed a lot after that, and I think that helped to prepare me for an online master's program. Yeah. Whereas if I wouldn't have had that experience, it probably would have been a little harder. Yeah. I think now in today's day and age, it probably is easier for people to transition to the online. Probably before me, when people were going through the program, it was much different. But when I had that, you know, COVID online experience, I think that helped prepare me. So I wasn't super nervous about the online. Sometimes the accountability aspect I would be a little nervous about, because it really is, besides your, you know, maybe 2 or 3 Zoom classes per session or semester, it was really just you're on your own.
Yeah.
And you got to figure out
self-motivated.
your assignments. Yeah. And so there wasn't like a professor keeping track of, your attendance in class and things like that. Someone that you could run into on campus or things like that. So I think that was a worry, or just missing something and not having the in-person professor to be able to ask, like, hey, can you explain this assignment to me more in depth? Everything's through email, or sometimes a prof will hop on a Zoom call, but mostly through email.
And you're relying on your professor to be swift.
Yeah.
And emails, and they're not always.
And some are not. And that was a very frustrating aspect of grad school for me, and I think for a lot of other people, is that sometimes it was like, okay, this assignment's due this week, and nobody really knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
And nobody's heard back from the professor, which could be frustrating at times.
That is where we rely on the solidarity of our classmates to be feeling the same way we're feeling.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself brought us together and helped us feel encouraged and supported.
Yeah.
I'm curious what, after having been through the program, looking back, what things you realized you wished you would have known before going into it.
That is a good question. Something I wish I would have known before going into this specific program, or just grad school?
In grad school.
I think something that I wish I would have known is how different counseling looks in the real world.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of pressure that I put on myself to make sure I was becoming like this perfect counselor. I'm already a perfectionist in my nature, which doesn't always serve me super well. It's a lot of pressure because
there's a lot of pressure. Yeah.
There's no perfect student or perfect, counselor, perfect person.
Yeah.
And I know that. But I think that that's something that I wish I would have known, is just that it's going to look different, and that's okay. It's not going to be by the textbook, and that's okay. And even when you graduate, you're not going to know everything. Absolutely. You're still going to have to research things. You're still going to have to rely on supervision and talking through things, and you won't have all the experience, and that's okay. You're still growing. So I think that is something important. What about you?
For me, I think when I thought about grad school, I wish I would have known that the professors, first of all, they're almost all doctorate level professors. And you know that going in, and so you are expecting very intense and difficult grading.
Yeah.
And that was not my experience at all. They are grading you very much based on, obviously they're grading on the APA style and the rubric and whether you're meeting all of those things, but they're also on your knowledge and if you're presenting yourself well. And that the grading, if I had known that, I don't think I would have been nearly as nervous.
Yeah.
Because I was expecting the grading to be very hard and have a very difficult time, because in our program you had to have a B.
Right.
Or you were out of the program.
Yeah.
And that was very daunting for me.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that their grade, I thought that was going to be very difficult to achieve.
Yeah.
And it was not nearly as difficult as I was scared it would be.
Right. And I think that, at least in my experience, if you were putting in the effort, and professors can tell when you write a paper in a night.
Yes.
But if you are putting in the effort, they're, they want you to succeed. Your professors do want you to succeed.
Yeah, that was huge for me.
And I know some people have had harder experiences in grad school where maybe it felt like their professors haven't been, advocates for them. But I will say, grading wise, if you're turning your work in, they're typically pretty gracious, unless it looks like you were being lazy with your work.
Of course, we have the same, we're coming from the same program and talking about this. I can't speak for the programs, but I do truly feel like our professors were our biggest fans. Like, they were really they really wanted to see us get through this program and to go out and do good things.
Yeah, yeah. And at the same time, it still felt like there was an expectation of...
Very high expectation.
Yeah. I know that at least our program has a lot of rules and regulations that sometimes I would get frustrated with.
Yeah.
Which I didn't know before going into the program until I'm hearing from other interns at different schools at my site that are like, oh, we don't have to do any of that. I'm like, oh, okay.
It's very frustrating in the moment when you're living
frustrating. It. But in hindsight, I do think that, they train good counselors, which is important.
Absolutely.
So what would you say if you could go back and tell Abby before starting grad school? Any words that you would tell?
I would probably go back and tell myself that it feels overwhelming now, but your life will mold around it. Mm-hmm. It becomes part of it. Like I said, my son was 4, my daughter was 5 or 6, and so she's 13, he's 12. So it was the majority of that, of their little childhood.
Yeah.
And although I had to say a lot of no's, I don't feel like I missed out on a lot either. Mm-hmm. We made it work, and my life molded around it.
Yeah.
It just becomes part of what you do. I had people come up to me all the time saying, I don't know how you're doing this.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it. I could never do that. And I would just say, but it just becomes part of life.
Yeah.
We make our life fit around anything that is important to us. So if I could go back and say, it's just going to become okay, that's probably what I would say.
Yeah, I think that's important to remember too, is that it's really a season of life.
Yeah.
And you have to have that mindset of like, this is not forever.
Yeah.
This is just a season, a busy season of life that I'm going through, and there's an end goal to be achieved, and something that hopefully everyone doing it is passionate about. I think if you weren't, you surely wouldn't finish grad school if you weren't passionate about it. So definitely that mindset of this is just a season of life, and it's you don't want to take it for granted either.
Right.
Like it's a hard season, but it's a good season of life too. You learn a lot, even about yourself.
Yeah. Did you work at all during grad school?
So I was a graduate assistant, and that's what I did my first 2 years. And then I worked as the full-time head coach my last year. So my last year was most definitely the most
that's a hard
stressful and time. There was not much time spent doing anything other than coaching in school. Yeah. And now, which I'm so thankful for, but now that I'm out of it, I look forward to saying more yeses. Like, even just, we still said yes to a lot of family things, but even now just like vacations and things like that, like getting to experience that side. And my husband and I, we got married right before grad school. So like we got married in August and I started school the next week, I think.
Wow.
And so our whole marriage, all we had known is me in school and what that looks like. And so now figuring out what being out of school looks like.
That extra time.
Yeah. And now quickly having, a baby on the way. So we're starting to figure out new things too. And
can't wait for baby Bart.
Yeah, baby Bart. It's just crazy how much life changes in those 3 years. Despite,
it is.
Life still goes on in those years of grad school.
Yeah. And memories are still made, and it's not like life just becomes school.
Yeah. I think that would be important too. Like if I could go back when I was wanting a podcast to tell me about things like this, that's what I want to hear. That's encouraging to me.
Yes.
Is that, like it's hard and we can acknowledge that and say that that's so true. But we can also say that so much good still happens during that time in your life. Your life doesn't have to be on pause.
Right.
But it might just look a little different.
Yeah. I know that during our internship, the second semester of our internship, my husband went to Vegas without me with his parents because that was a no I had to say.
Yeah.
But previously in the first semester, I got to say a yes to a cruise.
Yeah.
And it was our first vacation in a few years because I had been in school. And it was nice because being an online, going on a cruise was possible because I could get the internet and still do school. And so you can still make things work. And it's not all no's. I worked for the first year of grad school at my kids' school, and then I took the second year, because you did it in 3,
Mm-hmm.
and I did it in like 2.5, I think. And so I took the year of internship. I only did internship and didn't work, which is opposite of you.
Yeah.
And then the first year I did work. And as far as that schedule went, I was still able to maintain working and doing school only during the week, so I'd have my weekend with my kids, by just making sure I stuck to a really rigid schedule of when I have this time off for lesson planning or whatever it was I was doing in the school, I could get some homework done with permission from the school.
Right.
Or having somebody take my kids
Yeah.
to go do something, and I would go to the coffee shop and do work. So to people who just don't think that they could find the time, and that's what's holding them back from doing what they feel like they are called to do, I would say, do it.
Yeah.
You will make it work.
Right. I think that's a really good point too, is that a lot of people might really want to do something like this or go back to a grad program, and there's a lot of fear surrounding, like, well, I'm, one of our big incomes in our family,
Yes.
or I, like you were a stay-at-home mom, but like that's a huge life shift for them, for you to go back to school and then look at working after school and things like that. And there's a lot of fear surrounding even that, of just the money, and obviously you're paying for grad school on top of leaving or lessening hours at a job.
Yeah.
But I knew quite a few people in grad school who continued to work pretty full time, and a lot of jobs. I can't speak for every employer, especially if you're going from like a business to mental health. It might look a little different. But there are a lot of, if you're working full-time in mental health and they know that you're going back to school, I think that there's some flexibility that they'll offer, which can be helpful. But I knew a lot of people there were quite a few teachers that I knew that were working full-time and continuing to be, full-time students as well. But there's also different options for, this would be something for not even just our program, but for anyone to talk to an academic advisor about, is there's different options for tracks. Like, some people weren't full-time students and they just did the grad program very slowly, very part-time. And maybe it took 4 or 5 years, but they weren't doing it full-time, and that worked better for their schedule. And I think that those flexibility options might not be as known, but something good to know that can be an option. Yeah. And if it's not an option at one program, it most likely will be at another.
Absolutely.
So making sure that you're looking into those things if that's something that you're considering.
Yeah. I mean, I have a very good friend who was in our program who went from the 3-year track to, I think she ended up taking a full semester off. If I'm not, maybe even a full year, I'm not exactly sure, but she slowed way down. And the school just worked with her with, okay, this is what you can do, and to make it work for her and her lifestyle.
Yeah.
And what she needed at that time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that can help bring down a lot of, fear surrounding things like that. That doesn't mean that it won't be hard to work full time.
No, absolutely.
Like, even full-time coaching, which coaching is in college is just a whole different world, and my 40 hours coaching looked a lot different than a 9 to 5, which was good because it could be flexible. And my athletic director knew that I was in my internship, and so he was able to be flexible with me as well. But I will say coaching takes more time in the evening than what other jobs would, and so yes, it was full time. There was a little more flexibility. It just meant my whole day was pretty full. And I think the hardest part for someone going into grad school working full-time will be that internship. The hours that you have to complete for that. Yeah. That's where there will have to be a little bit more flexibility, I would say, with jobs and what that looks like.
Yeah. What do you think you would say to someone who has fear over their support network? They're not sure that they have the support they would need.
That's a great question. Yeah, I would say to be in grad school and feel like you're doing well and can keep your head above water, a support system is really important.
Great.
And I think it's that, let's say maybe going into grad school, you don't have the best support system. Find your support system in the people in your classes. Yeah. Or somewhere. Like,
Yes.
even if it's just one person to start, I think it's important to have someone behind you championing you. Was
Yes.
that a word?
championing. Now I can't do it.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Being your champion.
Yeah, someone supporting you
Yeah.
and encouraging you through the through the program that you're in. I would say you can do it alone, but we weren't meant to live life alone and to do life alone. And there's gonna come a point where you're gonna need somebody. And I will say, like, having my family and my husband as my support system was so helpful. They were so understanding. But you will find a support system in your school,
Absolutely.
in your classmates, because nobody else understands what you're going through except them.
Absolutely.
And as much as, I love my family and my husband, and they tried to understand, and there are many nights with tears and stress and things like that, and they do their best. They do the best they can, but no one will quite understand it like your classmates. And so I think for someone who might not have the family or friend support going into grad school, you will find it if you're intentional in your classmates, and you'll be able to find that support. And sometimes that support's even a little bit more helpful during the moment.
Absolutely.
Of crying about an assignment or something like that.
Yes. There's absolutely different levels or kinds of support, I think, that are needed. And I would say if you are going into a grad program and you need external support to find your community, get plugged in before you make that step. But once you do make that step, that I would agree that the support that you get from the people who are going through it with you is unmatched.
Yeah.
Because it's rigorous and it's hard, and it's not only is it hard to understand, we're bound by confidentiality anyway.
Yeah.
So when we're having a hard time, we went through a situation in our internship at Grace where it was a very difficult situation, and we were only allowed to talk to each other about it. And that was something that, you can't put a price tag on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And even going off of that is that not even just the grad school experience, but the experience of sitting with clients, no one else will understand except the people that you're going through it with. And the different feelings of the inferiority or, imposter syndrome and things like that.
Yeah.
Learning what boundaries look like in a session with clients, everything like that is a very unique experience in grad school that only your classmates will understand.
Absolutely.
And most of the time you can't even explain it to anyone else. It's hard to put words to that experience when the other person doesn't know.
Agreed. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think that that's something that can be encouraging for someone looking at going to grad school and wondering, like, can I do this without a support system?
Right.
Or maybe your family doesn't think that it's the right time or things like that. But I think that it's important to remember that you'll find your people in grad school too that you can relate to, for sure.
Yeah. What do you feel like was your most helpful class?
Oh, counseling skills.
Yeah.
I think that, counseling skills definitely took in counseling skills, because I don't know, other programs might call it something different, or it's basically you're learning the base counseling skills for the counseling, relationship room, things like that, for the actual therapy.
Yeah.
So some of those things are like, how do you utilize silence or immediacy or like confrontation kind of thing, which would be more immediacy, or active listening, reflection of feelings, reflection of meaning, all of those fun things that teach you about active listening in a way that I never learned before. And I think that
I feel like it's the most tangible class. That is what you are pulling from the most.
Yeah.
Was there any part of grad school you found the most intimidating? Whether it be a class, a situation?
Oh gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, practicum is already intimidating.
Yeah.
Practicum and internship. My practicum experience was a little different in that I only did co-counseling during practicum.
Oh, okay.
And so I really hadn't sat with my own client until my internship.
That would make internship very terrifying.
Yes, and I felt very unprepared compared to people in my class. And so, you know, that's just another way for that fear and doubt to creep in too, even while you're in the program. But I would say, yeah, that's where I felt the most like intimidated or, What about you?
I mean, again, like you said, practicum and internship were both like daunting for sure.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was the class load. There were, because I was on a faster track, I had 2 to 3 classes every term. And that could be pretty overwhelming. And that was something that I could struggle with. There were specific classes that were much heavier than others. Something I learned to do when I would have a class load that I felt was pretty heavy was I would not focus on the syllabus. I would look through the syllabus, obviously, just so I had an idea of what was coming, but I would strictly do week by week. And then big projects, obviously, we work on throughout the term, but I would strictly work week by week.
Yeah.
Because I would personally be too overwhelmed if I got too focused on the syllabus. And, you know, because there were some classes where you'd have a discussion board post plus a paper, plus you have to work on this group project. And it was just way too much for me to anticipate.
Yeah, for sure. If there was one piece of advice that you could give to someone looking at going into a grad program or about to start a grad program or in a grad program, what would it be?
Man, one piece of advice. I mean,
or
there's
multiple.
so much, but schedule. Have, and it's something that like we heard repeatedly while from our professors and from people in classes ahead of us. I remember people who graduated the year before asking them, and they all said, have a calendar, have a schedule, make sure you follow it. And I always I would just roll my eyes because it's like, obviously.
Yeah.
But it is just so important. And for me, a schedule didn't look like I'm going to do this assignment now and this assignment. Mine was having the boundary of weekends are for family.
Yeah.
And sticking to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so important. Something I would say is that, like, ask the questions.
Okay.
Ask your classmates questions.
Yeah.
There were a lot of times, especially at the beginning, where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm the only one feeling this way. I'm the only one who doesn't know what's going on. I can't ask anyone. I'm going to sound so dumb. And then finally you ask someone and it's like, oh, I know 7 other people in the class that are feeling this way.
That is
and
so
it's
real.
Like, trust yourself and ask the questions. And even if that means getting out of your comfort zone and asking a professor or emailing a professor, like, do it.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure there's other people feeling the same.
Yeah. And something else I would say would be make the connections.
Yeah.
Reach out to your classmates.
Yeah.
Everybody is nervous about doing that.
Right.
Nobody knows each other.
Yeah.
Rarely, I should say. We did have 2 women in our of our classmates that were best friends, but rarely do people actually know each other. And just reach out to someone in that first class. Yeah. Send that email.
Yeah.
Somebody that you think looks nice. And something nice that Grace did was they set you up with somebody coming in. I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah.
Yeah, where you had somebody else coming in at the same time that you had to interview, quote unquote interview, just so you had a friendly face.
Right.
But yeah, I would absolutely recommend reaching out to somebody right away.
Yeah. Especially knowing in our experience, like, that makes you feel so much less alone.
Yes.
When there's people that you know that you can reach out to, and then you begin to feel more comfortable reaching out to them and being like, hey, or maybe they're not in the same class, but they already took that class, and asking them questions or things like that can help to feel less isolating within the program, and definitely making those connections. So
spread your wings.
Yeah. Just do the thing.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
It's so exciting.
And it can be done. So if you're questioning if you can do it, yes, you can.
100% you can do it. You can do it right out of at 20, you can do it at 40. It can be done.
It can be done. And and I think that if you feel the calling and you feel led to this helping profession, like, listen to that and don't, obviously everyone's at a different stage in life, but if it's something that you feel really led to or passionate about, I would listen to that. And maybe it's not going to grad school, but it's something else within the mental health profession, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But figuring out, is this something that, I can see myself doing long term, and where that passion's coming from, I would always encourage you to at least spend time considering it.
Yes.
Whether that means you do it or not.
Yeah.
But don't count yourself out just because of the stage of life you might be at, or all of the things that we talked about today.
Yeah.
All of those fears. Don't let the fears keep you from doing something you're passionate about.
Absolutely. And have faith in yourself.
Yeah.
You're bigger and smarter and stronger than you ever thought you could be.
Yeah.
And this is something that's going to stretch every part of who you are. But you're going to grow so much from it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we hope that y'all enjoyed this podcast episode, and hopefully it made you feel a little less alone and answered some questions that you had and fears that you may have had or still have going through grad school. Be sure to like and subscribe to our podcast and keep hearing from us.
Absolutely. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Thanks for hanging out with us on Couch Conversations Beyond the Textbook. If today's episode resonated with you, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone you think can relate. Keep showing up, keep learning, and remember, the best growth doesn't always come from a textbook. See you next time.